Hello friends, welcome to the first paragraph project. This is the project wherein I talk about what works and what doesn't work in an opening line and the first paragraph. Today I have chosen a book called The Book of Goose by Yiyun. And before I begin, let's read and see what Yiyun has started with. You cannot cut an apple with an apple. You cannot cut an orange with an orange. You can, if you have a knife, cut an apple or an orange, or slice open the underbelly of a fish, or if your hands are steady enough and the blade is sharp enough, sever an umbilical cord. I don't know about you, but the opening line and the last line of this paragraph took me by surprise. It's so unusual to say you cannot cut an apple with an apple. It's a strange sentence to begin in a novel. It's a simple statement, almost like a child explaining a fact about the world. And of course, an apple cannot cut another apple. But then Yiyun Li does something fascinating. She takes this ordinary observation and slowly transforms it into something unsettling. Because this paragraph is not really about apples, it is about tools, it is about separation, it is about what happens when something innocent becomes capable of violence. And by the end of the few lines, we move from cutting fruit to cutting a life connection. So, today, in the first paragraph project, we are together going to look at the opening of this book and explore why this paragraph immediately creates tension, mystery, and emotional unease. And as usual, I will analyze it through five lenses: curiosity, voice, character, stakes, and momentum. So let's see how a curiosity has been generated or created through this first paragraph. It actually begins with curiosity only. The first question this paragraph creates is, why are we trying to cut an apple with another apple? And when readers open a novel, they are expecting a story. They are expecting a character, a situation, a problem. Instead, Yiyun gives us a philosophical observation. An apple cannot cut another apple. Why tell us something which is so obvious? And that is exactly where curiosity begins, and you wonder, where is this heading to? The paragraph actually makes us slow down. It creates a gap between what we know and what we want to understand. When I read this first line, I was trying to understand that what am I missing? Is there something more to this? Is there something hidden in this line that I'm not able to grasp? So I was thinking that, okay, this is about an apple, and then we go on to knives, and then suddenly we move into fruit, and then from fruit to fish, and finally, that was the most surprising element for me when we arrive at an umbilical cord. The movement was totally unexpected. As a reader, I was pulled forward because I want to understand what kind of story begins with this connection between a knife and birth. And that is the power of curiosity, and that is the power of Yiyun Li's writing. It does not always come from asking a dramatic question. Sometimes curiosity comes from just creating discomfort. And I love the way Yiyun started her novel, The Book of Goose. Now let's look from the other lens, which is voice. The voice in this opening is very controlled. There is no emotional explanation, and that is one of the way Yiyun works in her writing. When you will read a book, you will see that you won't find too much of emotional explanations going on into her writing. And same is with this paragraph. There is no description of the landscape, there is no introduction of characters. The narrator simply states facts. You cannot cut an apple with an apple. The sentence structure is mathematical, it is logical, almost like a lesson, like a teacher opens a lesson for students. But underneath this calm voice of Yiyun, there is something disturbing. The writer does not say that a knife can be dangerous. She demonstrates its possibilities. She tells us a knife can cut fruit. It can definitely open a fish's belly. And it can actually be used to cut an umbilical cord. The voice remains neutral while the image becomes darker and darker, and the contrast creates that tension. The calmness makes the violence more powerful. If a writer describes something horrifying with extreme emotion, sometimes the reader knows exactly how to feel. But in case of Yiyun Li, she stays detached and the reader has to participate. We become the ones reacting to the writing. And that's the power of the voice in Yiyun Li's opening paragraph. The third lens is character. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do that right now because I am planning to bring many more books wherein I will talk about opening lines and first paragraph and bring as much information to you to help you in improving your writing. So let's understand the character. Interestingly, the first paragraph doesn't have any character to introduce to the readers. There is no name, no age, no background. But does that mean there is no character? I don't think so. I have read the book and I know how the story moves ahead and how the character comes. But right now, since we are talking about the first paragraph and the opening line, I cannot reveal about the characters who are in the story. But this paragraph reveals something about the mind behind those thoughts. Someone is thinking about objects, they are talking about cutting, they are also thinking of precision, and there is a relationship between things. This is consciousness that observes the world differently. The attention to the physical act of cutting tells us that something about the narrator's relationship with life. The phrase, if your hands are steady enough and the blade is sharp enough, is especially interesting because suddenly cutting is not only about the knife, it is about the person holding the knife. The human element is brought into the picture. There is a skill, there is control, and there is an intention. Before even we meet any character, we understand that this story may explore human capabilities, both creative and destructive. Now let's talk about the fourth lens, that is stakes. Now, Yuyun Li is incredibly clever. She begins with something harmless, which is cutting fruit. Then she slowly increases the emotional weight. From fruit, she moves to fish to umbilical cord. The final image changes everything. An umbilical cord is associated with birth, connection, motherhood, life. The knife that was used for an ordinary action suddenly becomes connected with one of the most significant human moments, birthing. And that creates a deeper question. What does it mean to separate? Because cutting an umbilical cord is both violent and it is necessary. It is an act of love, it creates independence, it marks the beginning of a person's life. So, the stakes in this paragraph are not simply physical, they are emotional and symbolic. This paragraph tells us that this story may explore complicated human relationship where love and pain exist together. And that's a marvelous way to show how stakes can be generated in just few lines. The last and the final lens that we talk about in the first paragraph project is momentum. Many writers believe that momentum comes from action. Someone is either running, some discovery is happening, or something is exploding. But this opening proves that momentum can come from thought. Look at the progression of this paragraph: apple, orange, knife, fish, umbilical cord. Each sentence pushes the reader somewhere unexpected. The paragraph is like a staircase. Each step takes us deeper, higher. The first sentence creates familiarity. The second repeats the pattern. The third introduces the tool. The fourth introduces danger. And then the fifth introduces human life. The momentum comes from escalation. The reader keeps asking, what is the next step? And the question carries us forward. So, as a closing, what I find it fascinating about this opening is that Yiyun Lee does not begin with an event. She begins with a connection between objects, between cutting and creating, between violence and birth, between separation and love. The paragraph teaches us something important about openings. A powerful first paragraph does not always need to explain the story. Sometimes it simply needs to create a feeling, a question, or a disturbance, a sense that something deeper is hiding beneath ordinary words. And that is exactly what the Book of Goose achieves. If you enjoyed this analysis, join me for the next episode of the First Paragraph Project, where we take another opening line and examine what makes it work or what makes it fail. And it will be done through the five lenses of curiosity, voice, character, stakes, and momentum. This is Vandana Sehgal signing off. I will see you next week in my next video. Take care, keep shining and smiling.